I'm here with Thomas Haber. You're a world champion, and it's not every day that I come across a world champion. I've had the chance to speak to 7 different champions, and each of them have given me strategies for how to cover all of those factions. But today we're doing something a little bit different. Thomas is going to give me 1 tip for each of the factions. He's also, and you won as Russia, I understand.
Correct.
Correct? And I guess it was a little Russia, Italy, a little bit of France?
Russia, Italy, France, because it was a Swiss-style event rather than a top board, since there's a couple different styles of tournament to play in.
Awesome.
So, 1 via Swiss.
So we're going to give you 7 tips, 1 for each nation, but also we'll give you 1 tactical tip, 1 diplomatic tip, and I think we'll save our strategic tip for the end. This will be the most important tip that you can learn about diplomacy.
Sure.
All right, so let's begin first. We can just work our way across the map.
Sure.
Let's start with England. What would you tell me, especially as a player just getting into the game, or maybe even a higher level player, what's the most important idea to keep in mind there?
So in terms of what you should do as England, the key is actually the English channel.
Yes.
So you see typically with new players, and then as you get through that experience curve to the most experienced players, them opting to go to the English channel as something that is very powerful. It doesn't mean you have to attack France,
yes,
but it means that you could focus that on Belgium and give yourself a better play while keeping France back, because they're a naturally defensible position. So consider going to the English channel more as a start than you would then, say, typical games going to North Sea, Norwegian Sea.
And wouldn't
switch
that
it up a bit.
Instantly make you enemies with France?
It doesn't necessarily have to. It does make them nervous, because of course no one likes when someone else is bordering on your home centers. But again, that's where you have that opportunity to go, let's focus on Belgium and build from here. It has to be based upon who's in France, if you know about them, their style of play versus a newbie, and see how they're going to necessarily react. If there's someone who's going to attack you if you do anything aggressive towards them,
yes,
then it was going to happen sooner or later. So you might as well rip off the Band-Aid early.
I love your approach. Yeah. So good. Speaking of France, let's move into France. What should I be doing, either opening, mid-game, late game? What's the ethos or the philosophy that I should follow?
So I'd say France is naturally defensible. From a game perspective, it's like they're up on a hill. So they're very hard to take down, which means that you don't need to get 3 builds to start every game and get everyone's attention on you. It's okay to get 1 build. It's okay once you get your initial builds to actually defer to the following year. So that way you don't have to make a commitment with Brest or Marseille, a fleet in one versus a fleet in the other. What you just want to do is make sure that people diplomatically are attached to you, as in they don't want to see the negative build against them.
Yes.
So it's okay to just do 1 build in 1901, or it's okay to do 2 builds, but bank 1 of those. And be very clear with the other players in your negotiations that, you know what, if you do this for me, you make these moves, then I will bank 1 of those builds for you rather than build next to you. Brilliant. And then we can move from there. So that way you still have something in your back pocket if they are going to be aggressive to use against them, but it will also help them go in the opposite direction to work together.
So something I've found with a similar strategy is I might get a build from somebody, but I'll say, listen, this is your ship, this is your army, and I might say, you tell me what you want me to do, treat it as your own. And even though I have the power, they now feel like, oh, this is, 1, we're a team, 2, I have some control over this. So if you do get that extra build, maybe it's one you use a little more flexibly like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make, is you always want to, this is across all powers, go talk to the other powers and try to find out what's like, what would make you most happy? What do you most want to see off of this? To at least have them plant those goalposts on there rather than be wishy-washy. Like, if you could direct this unit, like, what would you do with it?
Yes.
And work from that sense of positive on the same side of the table. Now, you may not do that, but at least you've shown enough concern to ask them and to take it into account. And that's part of the trust building that occurs throughout the game that can end up paying off. Because if you don't particularly have a plan for it, or you're flexible in what you want to do, doing that little thing for them that you're going to do anyway,
that's right,
help builds up that capital with them that you can use later in the game.
Very good. Moving into the center, we have Germany. And Germany at our recent tournament got absolutely slaughtered. Yeah. So how do we avoid that?
Yeah, being in the center of the board, and this is like Germany, Italy, Austria, you have the concerns because you're surrounded. You could be dogpiled by 4 powers at once. So what do you do as Germany? Same thing, is you want to make yourself the least appetizing target on the board. So don't take necessarily wild chances unless you're fully confident in what the other players are going to do. Put yourself in a good defensible position and be firm. If you are Germany and you are sort of wishy-washy in what you're going to do, that sort of is going to be looked at as something that other people can take advantage of.
That's a flag.
And you absolutely don't want to have that red flag come up. what you want to do is be firm of like, this is my target here. I'm going to set up good defenses here. Let's plan the bounce here. You know, being very clear about what you're doing, establishing again some of that capital with the other players about, we agreed to bounce here, we followed through. Where I helped you here, not to get myself out of position, but helped you here to focus in other directions. With Germany, you also have to absolutely work the board. Talk to everyone, every round, use up all the time available to make sure that someone like Turkey is potentially causing trouble for Russia or Austria, if Austria tries to sneak into like Bohemia or Tyrolia to start the game. As we saw in the tournament here, an immediate move to Tyrolia into Munich in 1901 to take a player out of contention for the championship.
Oh, well, and the worst thing is when an England says, I have nothing to talk about with Turkey. I mean, every player on the board should have something to say to every other player. If only, hello, here are some things that we could do to help each other. And I think that's important to keep those lines of communication open. Thank you. Now, I never get to play Italy, but in this term I got to play Italy. And my goal was actually not to win the game, but to stay alive. So I stayed alive with 6 dots. And I thought that was a huge accomplishment. What would you suggest to me? How would I take those 6 dots and turn that into topping the table?
Yeah, I'd say Italy's a challenging power to play. At least a lot of people find it difficult. It's my personal favorite power. And that's because in the game you have a sort of triangle between England, Germany, France on the west, and in the east it's Austria, Turkey, and Russia. So like Italy's sort of stuck in between. Most people look to see, all right, I got Tunis, and then what? Like, where to go? And a lot of people get stuck in that where they can't commit one way or the other, and they go,
where's your 5th dot?
4, where's your 5th dot? They go 4, 4, 4, 2, 0.
That's right.
In the game, or 4, 4, 4, 2, and in the game at that. So what I tell people who are playing Italy is, like, swing your sword. Like, you have to pick a direction that you want to go and swing there. Swing west against France, you're going to pick up an ally likely in Germany or England if you're doing that. Swing east either against Austria or Turkey. Again, you're going to find Russia as a willing ally no matter what you choose in that circumstance. And work with that person. You know, some people, they immediately think like, I'm going to always run in against Austria. You don't necessarily need to do that.
Well, that's bad because a weak Austria means a juggernaut, and nobody likes a juggernaut.
It potentially can lead to that as well, but you have to swing in one direction on there.
No waffling.
Build for it, go for it. If you delay, then you're going to be caught and fall behind others, and then you're just going to end up playing defense mid-game, late game. So go for it. That's my advice for anyone playing Italy.
Okay.
What do you have to lose?
You're right. Yeah, exactly. And you're playing from the short-sided position. Everybody expects you to lose. So come out of the middle and choose which theater you want to join. I love it. So speaking of Austria, there's a natural tension with Trieste, bordering both home centers of Austria and Italy. I worked out a deal where I came into Trieste. Not every player is open to that, but is that a good way to go? And or what other advice would you give to an Austrian player?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great deal of trust, and I would say it's important for you to try it at least once when you're playing Austria. Like, because why not? Again, what do you have to lose? Like, are people already counting you out as Austria? That's sort of like the traditional way that people think of Austria as weak.
Just smush them.
But historically, if Austria survives to the mid-game, they have the best chance of like winning or being in the draw just because you're just neighboring centers. You keep on growing and growing and growing. So my advice as an Austrian player is, if you're concerned, there's nothing wrong with sort of going like a hedgehog opening into Galicia, into Serbia, or go to Romania as necessary to open with.
Arranged bounce in
Arranged
Galicia.
bounces. You can do arranged bounce on there, although that ends up being like, something ends up being quite boring. Like Russia can do something more with Warsaw than in Galicia every time. Like, but if you're concerned about it, you can always set it up. Like good fences make good neighbors. The same way with Italy, where you ideally want to park that fleet in Albania and have a shot at Greece. But if you are concerned, like send Vienna down south to Trieste on it so they don't sneak in on you. Just a double check on there. The ideal state is you have a good rock solid alliance with Italy to start with. Maybe convince them either to swing against France just so you leave each other alone, or co-opt against Turkey. What I would say on this is don't make moves from a point of weakness. Like make moves that are going to be definite bounces with them or that are going to aggressively put you in a position. And just like Germany with Austria, you have to work the board. Use every minute available on the clock. Talk to everyone because things are going to be outside your control, but you're going to find willing partners in England, and England can relieve some of that pressure on you, right, by maybe going against Russia.
I think it's one of the underused techniques in the game is getting pressure relieved on you by having someone else pressure your opponent elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean that's my common advice to players. Like if someone's attacking and you can't convince them, what do? You don't give up. You don't rage. talk to that person's neighbors. The easiest way to get someone to stop attacking you is if they get attacked themselves.
That's right.
Talk to the neighbors, get them to make the attacks.
It's just like chess.
Yeah.
Right? If you are being attacked and you suddenly put pressure on their queen, you're now in a much better position.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, so that brings us, let's swing around down to Turkey for this one. Where do we start here? I mean, the traditional strategy is turtling Turkey. So how do we avoid just turtling until the game's over? And like, how do you be an actual player on the board?
So how do you break out? So like one of the common ways that people like to break out is just an immediate opening attack against Russia. Black Sea, Armenia, Bulgaria. But to do that and to be successful, Russia can defend it if it's just you making that choice against Russia. And that's where you're either going to need Austrian support for do it, or again, as Turkey, you talk to England. Sometimes there's a very quick discussions of just saying, I'm opening to Armenia and telling them that. And that puts it in their mind of like, maybe I should open north. If Russia's going to be knocked down, right, I can limit them. Or make that case to Germany of like, I'm going to make life difficult for Russia, so they feel more inclined to maybe bounce in Sweden. So if you're going to make that immediate move, say on Russia, you need partnership from those like early to mid-game allies to make sure that you're successful, rather than just hitting your head against the wall there. Likewise, if you're going to go against Austria, it's very easy to work with Russia as long as you come to agreement, of course, over the fleets. Like, park your fleet in Romania, Russia. You know, I'll send to Constantinople, push out to the Aegean, and it requires some degree of trust. And even in some cases, they choose to pop that internal fleet, but it's not necessary to be successful. All those dots are in front of you. As long as you have someone who's a willing ally, you can carve up Austria pretty easily. Now, Turkey opening up against Italy in this case, that's where you want your Austrian ally on there. You can be primarily focused on fleets, with them focused on armies, and easy division of the Italian centers, but you need to make sure that Russia's not going to sneak behind you when you make that commitment into the Med. You know, if that fleet's still sitting there, it's very easy then for them to move out in the fall turn, drop down another fleet in Sevastopol or an army in Sav, and then suddenly you're out of position and in a bad state.
Right. So to wrap this one up, it sounds like you almost need to flesh out who is the Russian player, who is the Italian player, and who do you want to make your move on. And there are options both ways. So it might come down to who do you trust more, or who do you not trust, or who do you want out of the game. Yeah,
I'd say the key is the players behind the players who are adjacent to you, even those people you consider your allies. Like, you want your allies to do well, but not too well.
Right.
You know,
yes,
you want them to be held in check, so that way you're always sort of dictating the pace of play.
That's right. Absolutely. Proxy wars everywhere.
Yep.
Yes, I love it. So that brings us to our final power, but we still have tactics, diplomacy, and strategy we're going to talk about after that. So tell me about Russia. They've got they're really the only power with three front. I guess Germany's got multiple fronts too, but they're a three-front power. So how do you address one, that you start with more units, two, that you're fighting three fronts?
Yeah, so I consider Russia to be a balloon. You blow up really big or you pop.
Yes.
It is my worst power playing, but makes it odd because that's the power I ended up winning the world championship with. So I guess I blew up real big and didn't pop.
Yes.
So consider Russia as two smaller powers as opposed to one big power, because your fleets are split. And the same advice that I give to Italy, I give to Russia. You have to choose a direction in which you're going to swing. You have to make some commitment where diplomatically you're relying in one area for a player not to attack you. And again, you can either do it with direct relations or those neighbors that I'm talking about to make sure they don't have the ability to attack you. So it's either you're going to swing north or you're going to swing south. There are the occasional swings against Germany, and that requires a little bit more coordination in games like we saw here where Germany was taken down by 4 powers, but that's more rare than the traditional north or south opening. And that would be my advice for Russia is you're good buddies with France, make sure that France is keeping the English occupied no matter what, and as needed, make sure Italy is also a good buddy either against Austria or Turkey. You're just natural allies to start the game. So have that good line of communication. You can sometimes let them dictate where your focus is going to be, because again, as Russia, time is on your side, because you're already starting off one center above them. You have the ability to send north or south with your build, so you can have explosive growth. You just need to make sure to lock down 1 or 2 allies on the border, people who are at least not going to attack you, to give you time.
Right.
And then you just get a foothold and keep on pressing and pressing and pressing until you solo and win the world championship.
So maybe we can call that a remote ally strategy, is pay attention to those really closely. Very cool. So I'd love to move on to tactics generally across the whole map. When players are inputting their orders and they're ready to commit, what advice do you give to players in terms of how they make those final decisions. Sometimes they're very rushed.
Yeah. I would say whether you're playing face-to-face or playing online, the best thing to do is try to work out what the other powers are going to do against you before you consider what your moves are going to be. So plan ahead for what's potential, especially the build circumstance. Once you work through what they have, then you can come up with a set that you feel is like safe and good, and then maybe you can look for maybe some of those unique plays. One of the things that's very important is observing every player every turn and sort of building up a player profile in your head of what they're like. Are they likely to be risk takers? Are they very conservative? And then if you get in their head, you can be more predictive with their moves, and then you can make those solid moves that are slowly gaining position on them over the course of the game, or that one dynamite move that crushes them to put you in a position to win.
Perfect. I love it. So it's if you were your neighbor, what move would you do? And that's kind of a neutral way to look at it. Are you a victim? Are you a target? Because as soon as you show weakness, when you put your throat up, eventually someone is going to go for it. So that's fantastic. The name of the game, and most people would argue the most important discussion point in this game is diplomacy.
Yeah.
So how do you manage the people at the table, and do you have one tip for doing that?
Yeah, I'd say generally for the best players in the world, these are people playing tournaments for decades. They try to lie as little as possible.
Yes.
It's something they will only occasionally bring out, and it's more in what they don't say that is revealing on there. Like, I'm not going to attack you this turn, or I can't commit to that. They don't want to be nailed down on that because they're trying to be first in their mind and second in everyone else's mind.
Yes.
So when I'm playing, there's things that I like to do that others don't necessarily consider, and that is when you're playing under a timer, time is a resource. So you can use someone else's time so they can actually collaborate with others and come up with plans against them.
Absolutely.
Or waste someone's time on there who's trying to defend against you so they can't do anything else. So leverage their time as a resource on there to run out the clock, because then if you've got the advantage, you can press. But on the opposite side, if you are under attack, work every minute of the clock, talk to everybody every turn, and make it known to everyone how much you actually care about the game and the outcome, because that is going to let them know you're not going to be an easy out. You're someone who's better as an ally than an enemy, because it's going to be tough to remove you from the game. And also, they will also consider you as someone worthy of being in the draw or worthy of winning because you worked and you earned it.
Yes. Fantastic. So we come to our final point, which is strategy, and we've saved this one till the end for a reason, because this is probably the most important element of diplomacy that we can offer.
So I'm going to say this first. There's no one strategy that works universally in diplomacy, otherwise this game would have been solved many decades ago. So the fact that it's not a solved game is one of the things that adds to its staying power.
Yes.
Right? So
which is why, if we can come up with something that really helps us move forward with this game.
We'll crack it on there. So what you can do is you can synthesize information from various good players over the years and try to find out your best path. And that's actually what I advise both new players that I teach as well as experienced players. Find the qualities about yourself that are the best and emphasize those in the course of the game.
Yes.
So, if you're someone that is very positive and outgoing, crank that to 10 during the game, because you're playing a role during the game. So you need to make sure that you're winning the beauty contest with everyone else. But on the flip side of that, you can go in the opposite direction. You can use those social graces that people are used to against them, make it uncomfortable for them if they're going to attack you.
Right.
As in, maintain that eye contact, the closest of the body on there, where you make them uncomfortable enough that you bully them into doing what you want. And I've seen successful players take both of those paths, where nicest person outside of the game will pay for dinner and drinks, wine and dine you, and they're an absolute terror on the board. One of the best players in the world that I played with, he lets it known on the board that he cares about this more than anything else in his life, and he cares about winning on the board more than anything else. That makes it really difficult for the other players to coordinate against them and to attack them, because they know that they're going to get the full focus of him for the next few hours if that's going to happen.
Wow.
But the flip side of that is also true, where if you're going the net positive, you're everyone's second in their mind and first in your mind, where by acclamation they are fine with you winning. That happens a lot on the top boards, where it's not necessarily the best moves you can make, but from a strategy perspective, being the person that people feel is deserving of that victory.
Well, and there are times where people will say, I have a choice between this player and this player, and I want to benefit you because I love how you've treated me.
Yeah,
So-
and that really matters, especially at the end. If they have to choose who to quote-unquote throw to,
Yes.
they're going to throw the person they feel has earned it, who's been nicer to them throughout the entire game, than the guy that potentially was the jerk to them during the course of the game. So keep that in mind, that there's a bit of an aspect that's closer to like the TV show Survivor than people may think when they're playing the game. It's not just about pushing the pieces on the board. It's more about working the other players than anything else.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you giving all of us an idea of how to play. Unfortunately, you will all be able, well, no, I don't think they will beat you on the table, because there's knowing it and then there's doing it. Get out there, get gaming,
And be legendary.